Ellen DeGeneres made a slick comment about Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett's attitude on live TV. But what Jasmine said next turned the studio ice cold and left America speechless. The email came through on a Thursday afternoon. Subject line, The Ellen DeGeneres Show. Appearance request for Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. Her communications director, Talia Brooks, stared at it for a moment, unsure whether to be excited or skeptical. Jasmine was in a policy meeting in D.C., halfway through explaining amendments on criminal justice reform, when Talia nudged her phone across the table. Jasmine glanced down, read the first line, and blinked. "Ellen," she said aloud, then leaned back in her chair. "Huh, that's, unexpected." The room quieted. Talia waited for Jasmine to finish her thought. "You think it's a good idea?" Jasmine didn't answer right away. The truth was, she'd watched Ellen's show over the years, sometimes while getting her hair done or killing time between flights. The audience laughed, danced, cried. It wasn't political turf, but it was visible turf. Prime time, national audience, millions of casual viewers who didn't normally tune into C-SPAN or Sunday panels. It could be a risk, or it could be the moment that shifted how people saw her. Talia spoke again, softly. "We don't control the edit. You know that, right?" "I know," Jasmine replied, "but I also know who I am." They booked the appearance. The week before the show, her team rehearsed talking points, researched past segments, even studied how other political figures had fared in that chair. Ellen had a reputation for light-hearted questions, but she could slip in something sharp under the guise of humor. Jasmine made a mental note. Don't laugh just to keep the peace. She'd seen too many black women smile through things they should have called out. The flight to Los Angeles felt longer than usual. Jasmine sat by the window, headphones in, but no music playing. Just thoughts. She wasn't nervous, just alert. Alert to how different the space would feel. Her voice, her tone, her posture, everything she said would be judged in a room where she was the only one like her. At LAX, a car picked her up. The driver, friendly and talkative, mentioned how excited his daughter was to hear Jasmine would be on the show. She said, "You're the lady with the sharp tongue and the sharp suits," he laughed. Jasmine smiled politely. "Let's hope that's a good combination." The studio was cooler than expected. Cold air, bright lights. Her green room was nice, too nice. Like a hotel room they didn't want you to get too comfortable in. The producers came in 20 minutes later. One shook her hand. The other, a woman with blonde hair and a clipboard, looked her up and down a little too long. "You look bold," the woman said, then chuckled. Talia, standing behind Jasmine, raised an eyebrow. "She means powerful," Jasmine said without blinking. "Oh, of course. Yes, that's what I meant," the woman rushed. Jasmine didn't say anything else, but she noticed how one of the assistants had already scribbled something on a cue card. She caught the words "attitude in Congress" at the top. Backstage, a young intern handed Jasmine a bottle of water. She whispered, "My mom follows everything you say. Thank you for how you carry yourself." That meant more than the booking ever could. Ellen wasn't in the building yet, or at least she hadn't come down to greet her. Most guests got a handshake, a hello, even if quick, but not this time. Jasmine checked the time. 10 minutes to go. A producer walked in and gave a quick rundown. Light banter, brief political talk, then audience Q&A. Jasmine nodded. She wasn't new to interviews. She was used to tough spaces. But there was something about this one. Something off-kilter. Still, she walked toward the stage when her name was called, calm as ever. Audience clapping. Lights up. Ellen's signature smile. Jasmine returned it. But she knew something the room didn't yet. And that knowing would soon change everything. The air backstage carried a strange kind of energy. Not chaotic, not exactly calm, just stiff. Jasmine had done press before. CNN, MSNBC, even a few conservative platforms where she was grilled from the jump. But this was different. Nobody was yelling. Nobody was aggressive. Yet it felt like the walls had something they weren't saying. A woman with a headset approached Jasmine as she sat quietly in the corner of the green room. "You good on water? You need makeup touch-up?" Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm fine," Jasmine said, then looked at Talia. "You feel that?" Talia crossed her arms. "Yeah, like we're being tolerated, not invited." A few minutes later, another producer came in, a man in his early 50s with wire-rimmed glasses and the practiced ease of someone who's been around Hollywood way too long. He introduced himself as Nate and spoke with the kind of friendly tone you'd use with a stranger's child. "We're really excited you're here," he said. "Ellen's been wanting to mix in more serious voices, give the audience something to chew on." Jasmine tilted her head slightly. "I appreciate the invite. Just curious. Why now?" He chuckled, caught off guard. "Well, I think people are starting to realize you're not just a viral clip anymore." That wasn't a compliment, but he thought it was. Jasmine offered a half smile and said nothing. Talia took a step forward. "We'd just like to be sure the segment reflects Jasmine's real voice," Talia said. "The full context, not just sound bites." Nate held up his hands. "Of course. No gotchas. Ellen respects your work, but, she likes to keep it light. She may tease a little." "Teasing who I am?" Jasmine asked, not breaking eye contact. "Oh no," Nate stammered. "Just general stuff, tone, passion, that kind of thing." She didn't respond, but something shifted. A line had quietly been drawn. 10 minutes before the show, Jasmine walked down the hallway toward the stage entrance. Posters of past guests lined the walls. Actors, athletes, comedians, all smiling, laughing, most of them white. She paused in front of a photo of Michelle Obama. That segment had gone well, but even the former First Lady hadn't been spared the occasional jab about her arms or how serious she could be. "You ready?" Talia asked, catching up. "I've been ready," Jasmine said. "They just don't expect it." Down near the curtain, Ellen finally appeared. No warm-up handshake, no small talk, just a quick glance and a "We good?" directed at the producer. The countdown began. 5, 4, 3, music, applause. Jasmine walked out and sat down, legs crossed, face calm. Ellen greeted her with that wide signature smile, and the crowd cheered louder. "Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett," Ellen exclaimed. "Welcome. You clean up nice." Jasmine chuckled once, more polite than amused. "I clean up every day. Congress just doesn't hand out makeup artists." The crowd laughed. Ellen raised her eyebrows. "Well, we're starting spicy." But that energy wasn't from Jasmine. It came from how Ellen framed it. They chatted for a bit, safe questions about Texas, Jasmine's journey from law to politics, what she does to de-stress. Jasmine played along, answered with clarity and warmth. She kept the pace calm, controlled. But then Ellen leaned back in her chair and shifted gears. "So," she said, "let's talk about that famous clip. You know the one. When you really gave it to that committee guy. I mean, whew, that attitude." The word hit like a slap. Ellen smirked and mimicked Jasmine's hand gestures. "You had that finger going like, 'Let me tell you something, my staff watches that every Monday.'" The audience laughed, a few claps, but Jasmine didn't. She straightened in her seat, took a breath. "I've noticed something," Jasmine said slowly. "When men are direct, they're called assertive. When women do it, we're called emotional. And when black women do it, suddenly, it's attitude." The room hushed. Ellen blinked. Jasmine didn't stop. "Is it passionate?" "Yes, because I'm defending people who've been ignored. Am I expressive? Sure. But calling that attitude isn't playful. It's dismissive." Ellen opened her mouth, but no sound came, and before she could recover, the tone of the show had already shifted. There was a beat of silence. Not the fun kind that follows a punchline, the kind where people start shifting in their seats, unsure whether to laugh, clap, or say nothing at all. Ellen gave a quick laugh, forced, thin. "Well, I didn't mean anything by it. You know I love a strong woman. I mean, I married one." Some in the audience chuckled nervously. Jasmine didn't break eye contact. "I'm sure you do," she said, her voice cool. "But loving strong women doesn't mean you get to reduce their power to a punchline." Ellen blinked again. This wasn't going how she expected. The energy on set shifted. You could almost feel the producers behind the cameras silently panicking. A man at the corner of the stage put his hand over his earpiece, listening for someone's voice in the control room. Talia, sitting off stage, stared directly at the floor manager. No one moved. Jasmine kept going, not louder, just sharper. "You know, there's this expectation. she said, turning slightly to face the audience, that black women are supposed to laugh along when someone pokes fun at our tone, like we're supposed to be in on the joke, even when the joke's on us. She paused, her voice steady. I'm not here to be funny. I'm here to be heard. This time, the silence came with weight. A few people in the crowd nodded, others sat frozen. No applause sign lit up. Ellen shifted in her seat. I was just referencing what's already online. You know, the viral stuff. People love it. I know what they love, Jasmine replied. They love the sound of someone standing up for themselves, but sometimes what goes viral isn't always what's most valuable. Ellen gave a tight smile. That's fair. It felt rehearsed, like someone had whispered move on into her ear, but Jasmine hadn't finished. You invited me here to talk, she said, folding her hands. So let's talk. Not just about the moments people clipped for the internet, but about why they happened. Why I had to speak that way to be taken seriously in a room full of men who didn't want to hear me until I raised my voice. This time the audience clapped, not wildly, just enough to break the quiet. Ellen nodded stiffly. So you're saying you don't regret it? I don't regret being heard, Jasmine said. I regret that I had to fight that hard just to be treated like an equal. Ellen leaned back in her chair. Well, she said, reaching for her mug, you definitely got people's attention. Jasmine leaned forward, voice calm but firm. But did I get their respect? That's what matters. For a few seconds, neither spoke. And then, for the first time in the segment, Ellen looked small. Not because she was being attacked, but because she realized she'd underestimated her guest. Talia could see it. The camera operator saw it. So did the audience. That moment wasn't part of the script. It was real, and you could feel it settling into every corner of the room. Finally, Ellen tried to recover with a new angle. All right, let's shift gears. Tell me something light. What's the most surprising thing about life in Congress? Jasmine let the tension sit a little longer. Then she smiled gently. Most surprising? Probably how often people expect me to shrink. More laughter this time. This time, it was different. Genuine. The room relaxed, but the power dynamic had changed. Jasmine hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't stormed off or made a scene. She'd done something rarer. She'd held her ground, but the real response hadn't happened yet. That came when the cameras turned off. The cameras stopped rolling, but the tension didn't. A buzzer sounded from the control room, signaling a commercial break. The applause sign blinked on, and the audience obeyed, clapping politely, still processing what they'd just witnessed. Ellen leaned forward in her chair, glanced at Jasmine, and smiled like nothing had happened. That was intense, but good TV, right? Jasmine stood. She wasn't angry, not even visibly shaken, but her silence said more than words could have. She walked off the stage, heels echoing through the floor panels, and disappeared behind the curtain before Ellen could finish her thought. Backstage, the mood had changed. One assistant handed Jasmine a bottle of water, but didn't make eye contact. Another whispered something into a headset, watching her from the corner of the room. Talia caught up with her just outside the green room. You okay? She asked. Jasmine opened the water and took a sip. I'm always okay. That's the part they don't see. Talia nodded. You said what needed to be said. You didn't flinch. I wasn't there to perform, Jasmine replied, and that's what they expected. As she sat on the small leather couch, her phone started buzzing in her bag. She pulled it out, 28 messages. A few from staffers back in D.C., one from her sister, and 2 from reporters she hadn't heard from in months. Twitter was already on fire. Do we need to get ahead of this? Talia asked, watching her phone blow up too. No, Jasmine said, almost smiling. Let it breathe. Meanwhile, in the hallway outside the dressing rooms, Ellen was pacing. She spoke low to one of the producers, Nate, the man who'd offered Jasmine that careful, surface-level welcome hours earlier. What happened out there? Ellen asked, frowning. That wasn't supposed to go viral like that. Nate sighed. We probably should have cut the attitude thing. You think? But it was too late. Clips were already being shared on Instagram, TikTok, and Reddit. People were transcribing Jasmine's words and stitching them next to other moments where black women had been mocked or dismissed on television. Commentators were jumping in, some praising Jasmine for her composure, others questioning Ellen's judgment. The hashtags #Jasmine Crockett and How Respect Black Women were trending within the hour. By late afternoon, the clip had been viewed over 2 million times. Ellen's PR team issued a short tweet from her account. I've always believed in highlighting strong voices. My conversation with Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett reminded me there's always room to learn. Thank you, Jasmine. Some found it genuine. Most didn't. Jasmine didn't respond. She didn't repost the clip. She didn't add commentary or try to spin it. She just let it speak. The story ran across the evening news, not as a scandal, but as a moment. A real moment. One where a woman refused to let her identity be flattened into a soundbite. One where strength didn't need to be loud, just undeniable. Back in her hotel later that night, Jasmine sat on the edge of the bed, phone in hand, watching a 15-second edit of the interview posted by a college student in Missouri. Congresswoman Crockett didn't raise her voice. She raised the standard, the caption read. She put the phone down and turned to Talia, who sat at the table by the window, scrolling through reactions. Still think we should have said no to this invite? Jasmine asked. Talia shook her head, half smiling. Not anymore. Outside the hotel, the night had settled in, but the conversation was just starting to move across the country. And Jasmine knew this wasn't just about her. It never had been. But the wave hadn't even hit its highest point yet. That was coming next. The green room felt smaller now, not physically, but emotionally, like the walls had inched closer since the segment ended. Jasmine sat in the armchair, shoes off, sipping what was now lukewarm water. The adrenaline had faded. What remained was stillness and an awareness that something had shifted. Outside the door, a quiet storm was brewing. Producers whispered into phones. Assistants typed at breakneck speed. No one dared knock. Talia paced, holding her own phone, notifications flashing across the screen. 3 new interview requests. MSNBC wants you tonight. Joy Reid's team just emailed, and someone from The View says they're reconsidering next week's panel lineup. Jasmine raised her eyebrows, amused. All of a sudden, I'm on everyone's vision board? Talia didn't laugh. You changed the temperature in that room. People felt it. That wasn't politics. That was truth. But Jasmine didn't want praise, not yet. Her body was here, but her mind was still on that stage. She replayed every second in her head, not with regret, but with a kind of hyper-awareness. When you speak up, especially like that, you learn to examine your tone, your breath, your silence, every pause, every inflection. She glanced at her phone again, an unread message from her mom. You were right not to smile. I'm proud of you. It hit differently than the public reactions. Jasmine read it twice, then closed her eyes. Meanwhile, just down the hall, Ellen was in her dressing room with her publicist and 2 of her senior producers. The door was shut. Her voice could barely be heard through the wall. She turned it on me, Ellen said, exasperated. Her publicist rubbed his temples. You called her passionate, not angry, but then you said attitude. You should have stopped there. Ellen leaned against the vanity. I was trying to keep it light. You kept it dismissive, one of the producers muttered under their breath, too quiet for her to hear. Ellen hadn't expected pushback. Not live, not from a guest with so much poise. Jasmine hadn't shouted. She hadn't stormed off. She'd done worse. She'd stayed still. And in that stillness, she exposed the imbalance in the room. Back in Jasmine's green room, the assistant producer finally knocked, hesitant but polite. Congresswoman, Ellen wanted to know if you'd stop by for a quick chat before you leave. Talia raised an eyebrow. Jasmine didn't look up. No, thank you. The assistant nodded and left. No questions asked. Jasmine stood, stretched her arms, and slipped her shoes back on. Let's go. You sure? Talia asked. We can wait for the car here. I'm sure. If I stay too long, they'll find a way to twist this into something else. Right now, it's clear. Let's keep it that way. As they exited the building, the sun was dipping low over Los Angeles. A small group of people had already gathered near the studio's back exit. Some fans, some press, a few holding their phones in the air, hoping to catch a shot of her leaving. One woman in her 30s stepped forward. She wore jeans and a faded denim jacket. No microphone, no media badge, just her. You didn't let her walk over you, she said, voice shaking a little. You looked her in the face and said the thing we never get to say. Jasmine stopped. And what's that? That we're not here to be tolerated. We're here to be taken seriously. They stood in silence for a second. Then Jasmine nodded once, No cameras needed. Talia gently tugged her sleeve. Car's here. As the door shut behind them, Jasmine looked out the window at the growing buzz on the sidewalk. She didn't say anything for a while, but when she finally did, it was simple. Let's get home. There's work to do. But home wasn't quiet anymore, because the rest of the country was wide awake. By the time Jasmine's plane landed in Dallas the next morning, her face had already become a fixture on nearly every major news site. Headlines varied in tone, but shared the same core message. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett calls out Ellen DeGeneres, gracefully and publicly. In the terminal, 2 TSA agents gave her a quick glance, then a double take. One of them leaned in and said, "Ma'am, that thing you said about respect, that hit." Jasmine smiled, thanked him, and kept walking. Her phone hadn't stopped buzzing. Messages from strangers poured in. Teachers, single moms, lawyers, college students, people who didn't follow politics but saw themselves in her. There was one message that caught her off guard. It came from a woman named Glenda Ruiz, a retired postal worker from Santa Fe, New Mexico. She'd sent a single sentence. For the first time, I saw someone on daytime TV who didn't shrink to make others feel bigger. Jasmine saved it in her notes. Meanwhile, Ellen's team scrambled to do damage control. Their carefully curated public image was dented, if not cracked. On her next episode, Ellen opened with a noticeably different tone. Yesterday, we had a very real conversation with Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, she began. It reminded me that listening isn't passive, it's active. I didn't get it right in that moment, and I'm still learning. Some viewers appreciated the gesture. Others saw it for what it was, corporate apology polish. Clean, vague, forgettable. But Jasmine didn't clap back. She didn't go on a press tour. She didn't drop a thread breaking down the exchange. She went quiet, not silent, but intentional. She posted a single tweet. Visibility doesn't matter if it requires silence. Thank you to everyone who refuses to shrink. It was reposted nearly 200,000 times in under 24 hours. Meanwhile, networks who once called her too combative now labeled her clear and commanding. Think pieces emerged, dissecting her tone, her presence, her decision to speak plainly in a space built for smiles and soft banter. But some people missed the deeper point. It wasn't about Ellen. It wasn't even about Jasmine. It was about how America still tries to package black women for consumption, how strength is praised as long as it's entertaining, not disruptive. Jasmine had disrupted that comfort. She didn't shout. She didn't fold. She simply didn't perform. In Detroit, a high school English teacher printed out Jasmine's quotes and taped them to the classroom wall under the heading, "Voice Matters." In Oakland, a local radio station opened up a 2-hour segment asking black women to call in and share the first time they were labeled too much in a room that wasn't built for them. And in Los Angeles, inside a glossy boardroom at a streaming platform that had previously passed on featuring her in a docuseries, someone said out loud, "We might have misread her." The irony wasn't lost on Talia as she scrolled through the latest analytics. Jasmine's following had nearly doubled. Her campaign donation page saw a massive uptick, and the media requests, well, they were stacking like unread mail. "You want to respond to any of this?" Talia asked one evening as they sat across from each other in Jasmine's office. Jasmine shook her head. "The moment already spoke. No need to explain it. That's what they always expect us to do. Explain ourselves until they feel better." "You sure? Even Oprah's people reached out." That made Jasmine laugh. "Now that's funny." But behind the humor was something sobering. She hadn't planned to make a statement that day. She hadn't gone there to go viral. She'd just reached a point where pretending to be amused wasn't a survival strategy anymore. What surprised her most wasn't that people listened. It was that finally, some of them heard. But this wasn't the end of the story. For one girl in Oklahoma, it was just beginning. 3 weeks later, the echo of that day still hung in the air. But it had shifted. It wasn't noise anymore. It had become something more personal. Quieter, but deeper. Jasmine felt it every time she stepped into a room and people looked her in the eye a second longer. Not with discomfort, with recognition. That afternoon, she was standing in a modest rec center gym in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Folding chairs lined the basketball court, and a mic stand stood at half height in front of a portable podium. It wasn't a flashy town hall, no cameras, no press, just real people, mostly local families and educators. some young girls with curious eyes, watching Jasmine like she might be something rare. She had just finished answering a question about education funding when a girl, maybe 15, stood up in the back. Tall, shy, with box braids pulled into a bun and a notebook clutched to her chest. She spoke quietly at first. "Hi, my name's Alondra." Jasmine nodded, smiling softly. "Hey, Alondra." "I just wanted to say," the girl continued, "I watched you on Ellen, and I never saw anyone talk like that on TV before. You didn't get mad, you just said what it was." A few people clapped lightly, but Jasmine held up her hand to keep the focus on the girl. "I got called too loud in class last week," Alondra said, her voice trembling. "But I was just answering the question. The teacher said my tone was aggressive." Jasmine's smile faded, not from disappointment, but understanding. Alondra looked down. "Anyway, it made me feel small, but when I saw you, it made me feel like maybe I don't have to change how I talk." Jasmine stepped down from the stage. She walked toward Alondra slowly, not to make a scene, but to close the space between them. When she reached her, she spoke just loud enough for the room to hear, but quiet enough that it felt personal. "Let me tell you something," she said. "Your voice doesn't need fixing. This world wasn't built to handle your volume, so they'll call it too much. But it's not." Alondra nodded, eyes welling. "They'll tell you to shrink so they can stay comfortable," Jasmine continued. "But don't ever confuse their discomfort with your value." The room was still. No applause, no noise, just presence. Later, as the event wrapped up and people began to shuffle out, a retired pastor approached Jasmine. He wore an old corduroy blazer and walked with a slight limp. He didn't say much, just reached out, took her hand, and said, "You didn't raise your voice, but you raised our bar." Back in the car, Talia scrolled through social media, still managing the tail end of the storm. But Jasmine wasn't looking at her phone. She was staring out the window at a row of kids playing on a cracked-up basketball court. "You think they'll remember any of this?" Jasmine asked. Talia looked up. "I think Alondra will." Jasmine nodded. "Good. That's enough." She didn't need another headline. She didn't need to trend again. What mattered most had nothing to do with followers or hashtags. It was knowing that somewhere, a young girl who almost quieted herself decided not to. And it was knowing that next time, if someone tries to laugh off her power, she might look them right in the eye and hold her ground, just like Jasmine did. Because respect isn't handed out. It's modeled. And sometimes you teach it best by not saying much at all, just by refusing to shrink. Let this story remind us. Every room we walk into is a chance to stand tall, not for applause, but for the ones watching quietly, hoping it's possible. If this story moved you, don't just like it, share it, talk about it, and subscribe for more stories that give voice to what too often gets overlooked.